fish. 4, 3. There we go. Well, it is 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you know what that means? That means it's time for Mission Log Live. Good evening, everyone. I'm Norman Lau. And with us again this evening for this fantastic show, we have Holly Amos. Holly, good to see you again.
Hi, welcome back. To see you too. Thank you.
Yeah, what's new?
To be here.
What are you wearing?
I might take this off. I'm really hot. I'm wearing my Niners jersey.
Show the fans.
Well, it's Bashir. Yeah. Can you see it? So, fun story. When I was in high school, I was a varsity basketball player, and my favorite athlete was actually a baseball player on the Angels, which I was born in Anaheim, so that worked out. He was very short-statured, won the World Series with him. His name's David Eckstein. You guys might know his wife. She created her universe, Ashley Eckstein. Anyways.
Oh, yeah.
I loved him. Yeah. I loved him because he was short-statured, and he happened to be number 22, so I adopted that number. Bashir is my favorite character on Deep Space Nine, and this episode is my favorite episode, and I had never paid attention to his number until a few years ago, and I was like, oh, he's number 22, and so I had to have the jersey made, so here we are.
That's awesome. It's really nice looking. And you know what? Thank you for the explanation. If you're getting too warm in that, because it looks like a warm jersey, you can take it off.
I think it's a hardcore jersey that I altered. So like
that heavy nylon, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I have Ultimate Computer underneath it. So
there you go. Cosplay and a show, folks, tonight on Mission Log Live. So before we get into it, make sure that you get in your calls by either clicking on the Zoom meeting link or using the one tap from your smartphone, or by calling 699. That's 900-6833. That's 669. I always get that wrong. 669-900-6833. Enter the meeting code and the password. Earl is standing by to take your call. And before we even get to more news and information, we have a very special guest on the show tonight. He is waiting in the green room. We have Trent Vanegas from the Quoting Gene Roddenberry podcast. So we will have him on just in a little bit. But couple of house cleaning notes that I want to get to. Some great news, some mediocre news, and some less than mediocre news. So let's get to the great news first. Great news is that this week on Mission Log, we will be dropping our new podcast. We will be dropping Shadows and Symbols. That is episode 2, season 7 of Deep Space Nine, which is fantastic. And there's a lot of positivity for us in that show, because there's a lot of stuff that we liked in that show. But I'm not going to spoil it any more than that, because I know the fans out there like John and I being a little bit more pro on Deep Space Nine, as opposed to not pro on Deep Space Nine. It's okay.
Not pro?
Well, every single series, every single episode, you're not going to have winners. You're going to have winners and not winners, right?
Yeah. Shadows and Symbols is pretty middle of the road, I feel like.
I think the whole thing is like a quadrilogy. You have Tears of the Prophets, then you have Images in the Sand, or Image in the Sand, then you have Shadows and Symbols, and then you have After Image. That's kind of like the death and rebirth of Dax.
But you're almost to baseball.
That's right. We actually going to be recording that this week, so the fans will hear that in a couple weeks. Speaking of fans, want to say hi to all the listeners that have joined us here on Facebook. Hello, Mark. Hello, one of the Pauls, Dominic. Dominic, check this out, dude. I wore this for you. You see that? I hope you did, because I'm not doing that again. That's way too much exercise for me. Mark, how you doing? Another Paul. Is this 2 Pauls, or is it the same Paul? It's hard to tell, but we have I don't know if you know this, listeners out there, but we have at least 3 Pauls join the show. And when that happens, buy a lottery ticket, because you're in luck. Yes, there's Paul Harveth and Carlos. How are you doing? David Takechi, good to see you. See Phil, Bob Amos. Bob, you got to get in faster, because you were second this time, not first. So I'm expecting you to be pole position every single time you log in when Holly's on.
Dad,
so thanks everybody for joining us. Also coming up this week, we have a little bit of news regarding 55-year mission Las Vegas. Now, as of this week, I had to make a difficult decision to cancel my plans as a co-host of Mission Law going to the 55-year mission celebration, because there has been an increase of activity around the tune of 50% new cases reported in the state of Florida. which is where I live right now. And to be completely transparent, because that's how I am with all of the listeners out there, I am one of two people that take care of my 90-year-old mother-in-law. My wife Carol and we take care of her, and traveling right now between Florida to Las Vegas and back, and all of the instances in between puts me way too heavy of a risk factor for somebody in our household who is 90 years old. So that was a very difficult decision, but it was a family-based decision. We weighed the pros and cons of traveling right now. And as of right now, it just really was not the most responsible choice that I could make. And I have to respect the other people that live, at home with both Carol, her mom, and just it's a heartbreaking choice, because I wanted to see everybody. But there will be some form of virtual programming with Mission Log as the convention is happening, whether it is going to be here on Facebook or on other outlets of social media, or especially on our Discord for our Patreon listeners. We want to make sure that we have access for everybody. And John and I are in the process of figuring out what that plan is going to be. So stay tuned. There will be something for those of you, just like myself, just like Holly, who will not be attending the convention this year, but we will be in some way, shape, or form connecting with all of you who also aren't going to the convention this year, because you all need a convention of something, because you deserve it. It's important, and community is what we're all about here at Mission Log. So what else is happening?
You are planning on going to Chicago, though.
Most definitely. As a matter of fact, I don't know if anyone can see this, but I'm going to put this on camera. We are not sponsored, but I do want to show this. Here is kind of like this is my eeny weeny teeny yellow polka dot bikini that, traditionally that's kind of like the summertime goal, or I should say swimsuit for me, to get out there and get into shape. My goal is to get into Khan Noonien Singh shape, a la Space Seed, for Chicago next year.
A la Space Seed, so not even like open chest Wrath of Khan.
No, a la Space Seed, because it's okay. Gold lame jacket time. It's gold.
Got it. All right.
Yeah. Okay. So if we have any callers lining up, let's see what's going on here.
We do have a caller.
All right. So, but before we get to our caller, I would like to introduce our very special guest for this evening. He is one of the co-hosts for Quoting Gene Roddenberry. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Mr. Trent Vanegas. How are you?
I am well. Thank you so much for having me.
It's good to have you here. So what's new? What's going on in the world of say Quoting Gene Roddenberry? The stage is yours. We're going to have callers line up, but I would like you to have the chance to acclimate yourself with everyone here who has listened to the podcast and who are still new to discovering it.
Yeah, so Quoting Gene Roddenberry is a 100-day podcast that is celebrating all of the amazing quotes that Gene Roddenberry left us with. And, people think it's a Star Trek podcast, and it is, because it focuses on Gene and his words and his work. But we really talk about things that go beyond just Star Trek itself. A lot of the topics are, we never even mention Star Trek sometimes because, Gene was such a champion of diversity and his love of humanity. And those things, while are hallmarks of what the Star Trek stories are, they, those resonate with people outside of Star Trek fandom. So that's one of the really fun things about Quoting Gene Roddenberry is you can enjoy it and listen to it and not really have a lot of knowledge about Star Trek and still get something from it. Well, at least that's what we hope.
Now, when you are a co-host on this show with Rachel True,
yeah,
and how are you approached to do this show? Because this is not something that you take lightly as a fan of Star Trek. This is the legacy of Gene Roddenberry. These are quotes that are directly attributed to his process and how he created a lot of the philosophy that goes behind not only just Star Trek, but who he is as a person in general. So how did this whole process start? Who approached you first and why?
So I was reached out to first by Claire Kramer, our amazing producer and the wonderful actress.
Mhm.
And she and I have been friends for a few years now. Back once upon a time, I used to blog professionally for about 12 years. I wrote a pop culture blog called Pink is a New Blog. And among the many things that I talked about on my site, which is very pop culture oriented, and I really focused on things that I was a fan of. So I was a huge fan of Star Trek. So if I was rewatching Voyager, for example, I would, talk about that. So Claire and I go back, and she became aware of the fact that I got into podcasting personally in the last couple of years, and she must have liked what she heard because she decided to take a chance on having me come on as co-host. And I remember they already had Rachel lined up, and one, Claire Kramer is calling me. Two, she's saying, "Hey, would you like to co-host an official Star Trek Roddenberry podcast?" And three, "Oh, and by the way, your co-host will be Rachel True, the actress Rachel True." And I was like, yes, yes, yes." So that's how this wonderful experience started for me.
So when you were given the opportunity to do this, what was your first reaction? Did you say, it's a little daunting, or I can't wait to jump at the opportunity to really express how I feel about the man who created Star Trek?
It was extremely daunting, and I was also very excited to jump at the chance to get in there and be a part of this conversation. And as Claire and I talked about it, I'm a big Star Trek fan, but definitely I know that there are fans out there who know a lot more than I do. I'm kind of weak on the original series, and I'm pretty strong on Next Generation and Voyager. So I felt comfortable with being able to have a conversation about Star Trek, whatever the conversation may be. And then the more that we talked about what the focus of the show is about Gene and his words and his philosophies and these lessons that that he really wanted to impart upon the fans through the stories in Star Trek and through these interviews or convention speeches that he gave in his lifetime. It seemed like a really like an honor to be asked to just be at the table, to just be there listening would have been honor enough. And to be asked to be one of the shepherds of the conversation, yes, was very daunting, but also so exciting. I couldn't pass it up.
Trent, can you explain to those who might not know why this is happening this year?
Yes. So on August 19th, so just in a couple of weeks, Gene Roddenberry would have been 100 years old. So Roddenberry Entertainment is celebrating 100 years of Gene Roddenberry. And the podcast, quoting Gene Roddenberry, started in May. And it releases an episode every single day for the 100 days leading up to August 19th, which would have been Gene's 100th birthday.
Which I think is lovely.
Yeah, it's really a nice way to honor the man. I mean, he's such a legend and larger than life. But hearing our guests, and we have fabulous guests reading a quote a day, hearing Gene's words, it really is a lovely way to honor him, because it's one thing to be a fan. Like, it's one thing to look at his work and the world that he created and all these characters that are so beloved 55 years later. And it's easy to see why people can be fans of his. But when you hear his words and you get a sense of who he was as a person, as just, a fan himself, as a lover of science, as a lover of humanity, it's just, to me, it's one of the nicest ways you can honor someone is by remembering the words that they spoke and the lessons they left us. So yeah, I mean, it's a really special way to honor his legacy, I think.
Now, when you were brought on board with Rachel, have you or Rachel worked together before, or is this something that you did new together? Did you have an instant chemistry when you started working together?
So we had not met previously. As I mentioned, as a pop culture blogger, I've been a huge fan of hers for many, many years. I always say my 4 favorite movies, and they all came out in 95 and 96, are Clueless, Empire Records, Hackers, and The Craft. And Rachel is one of the leads in The Craft. So she's been one of my beloved actors of my lifetime. And those movies, if you like those movies and you get a sense of those movies, you get a pretty good sense of who I am as a person. So just again, having her on board as the co-host was something I could not turn down. And she is a force to be reckoned with. And I learn something new every time that we interact together. She is funny and lovely and so smart. She's so well read. And I'm very, very happy, I think, to say that we hit it off pretty much from the start. And I think we've gotten to, we've recorded up to like our 80th episode. So we still have a few more to go before we're finished. But I think we hit our stride pretty early, and we've been going strong. Hopefully, and the listeners agree.
Well, one of the things that the listeners may or may not know, especially as you go through some of the earlier episodes of Quoting Gene Roddenberry, is that you and Rachel had on both John Champion and I. So without further ado, I'd like to bring in the sharpest dressed man in the virtual room right now. So everyone at Mission Log Live, say hello to Mr. John Champion himself. Welcome, John.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm so sorry to crash your show, Norm and Holly. Thank you for letting me drop in. Listen, this is just an important question that's been hanging over me. And Trent, I'm so glad that you're doing the show tonight. Look, Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek, blah, 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 Roddenberry. We know. All right, the damn Brady house. Okay?
Yes.
A very Brady renovation. You are a producer on this show. How? Because the space and the rooms and how did that come together?
So what John is referencing is a show called A Very Brady Renovation that I worked on as a producer for HGTV. And the very long story short is the house had never been on the market. So it was sold to the previous owner in 1973, and it has always been in that family's possession. And they passed away in, was it 2017? I want to say.
Wow.
In June. A bidding war erupted. Everyone wanted the house. Discovery and HGTV came in at the last minute. They outbid everyone, bought the house, and then they were like, okay, now what? And they decided, if you're not aware, the Brady house that you see on the Brady Bunch, the exteriors, that is the real house that is here in Southern California in the greater Los Angeles area. And if you Google it, you can find out where it is. So the exteriors were all filmed at the real house, but the interiors were filmed at Paramount. On a big soundstage. So all the rooms, the backyard, all of that was filmed on a soundstage. And the idea was, can we turn the actual Brady house, the exterior, to make it resemble in any way the actual house, the fictional house that we saw on the show? And I can only describe it as television magic. We were able to do so. The house had enough land in the backyard for us to build out. We lowered the living room to be able to fit a second floor, because the house was not even a second floor, a 2-story home.
Oh,
and
wow.
I would say within, honestly, 89 to 90% accuracy, we were able to make the Brady house a reality in a real actual house. The orange and avocado kitchen.
Yeah.
We found the couch pattern in a dead stock somewhere. And then we also reached out to fans all across the country. And if anyone had an artifact or a piece of furniture that was from the same company from the actual furniture that was used on the show, we either asked them to donate, or in certain cases we bought. And we've managed to find a lot of really cool and actual artifacts from the Brady Bunch. The horse, we found the horse in a Paramount storage bin.
Wow.
It was broken. The legs were broken, and we 3D mapped it, and we made it whole again. It was a really, really fun project. One of the greatest things I did. And we got to work with all 6 of the Brady kids. And I'm very proud to say that I became really good friends with Maureen McCormick and Eve Plum. And Eve Plum, who played Jan Brady, is a huge fan of my cats on Instagram. So that's one of my claims.
Wow. Okay, and we're talking real Jan, not fake Jan, when they moved over to the Brady Bunch Variety Hour, produced by Sid and Marty Krofft.
Correct.
Although fake Jan, fabulous singer, she is great, very talented, but you have the real deal.
We had the real deal. And honestly, we tried to figure out a way to incorporate some of the actors like that. So the fake Jan actress or Cousin Oliver, like we really tried to bring as much of the heart and spirit of what the Brady Bunch was into our show. And because we couldn't really do like a 26 episode series, not everything made it, but we definitely tried. We gave it our best, and we hope that fans liked it.
I have an important question for you, Trent. So
these are all important, Norman.
No, this is important for me. So in recreating something of this magnitude, did anyone have the desire to play ball in the house?
I can confirm that people did play ball in the house.
Okay.
And it might have been during a late night sleepover, perhaps, that happened when the house was finally finished, and the architect and the producers kind of wanted to christen the home before we had to hand it off to HGTV. And we had some fun. We had a lot of fun, and ball was played in the house, even though Mom always says,
don't play ball in the house.
Right. Now, after everything was finished, did somebody come along and buy it? Like, they would maintain it as the Brady home, because it's a huge amount of work that you put into it.
So through the entire duration of our filming, because as I alluded to in the beginning, HGTV wasn't really sure. They bought the house, and then they were like, okay, what do we do with this? And then we kind of figured it out. And along the way, the show took form. It did really well on social media, because we had I think it was on Facebook, but it might have been across all the social platforms, called Building Brady, where when we had our big camera days where the Brady kids, now Brady adults, were filming with us, we put things online, and it tracked so well that HGTV thought, oh, we need more. And then we did a very Brady Christmas renovation special where we filmed another episode where we decorated the Brady house in Christmas ornaments with a real tree, and we brought snow to Southern California and all of that. So the plan that I was aware of at the time was they were going to give it away. They were going to do a contest, and they were going to give it away.
Oh.
Then they did some contests where fans could spend the night or spend the weekend. So it's been some time now since I've been out of the loop, so I'm not entirely sure, but I do believe that HGTV and Discovery still own it, and I know that they've filmed some things in there since. So
the sleepover thing, they do that with the Christmas Story house too.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I know that some Food Network shows filmed in the Brady kitchen. I think the Pioneer Woman did an episode of in there. And so, I cannot explain to you what it is like to open that front door and you're in the Brady house, and it's real brick and mortar, and it's a real couch, and the carpet. We found dead stock carpet that was the exact match of the carpet. It was truly a magical, serendipitous experience that, honestly, there's nothing that I would change, and not even to get it to 100%, because I feel like we got it so real and so usable real that it is perfect in my opinion.
Like cosplay with a house, like finding like perfect fabric. Yay.
There is a neighbor in the neighborhood, and I believe the Twitter account is I Love the Brady House, and they post video and photos of the house almost every day. Like, they walk their dog, and here's the sun going down behind the Brady house. They were a fan of the house before, and now that it has been renovated, and whenever there's filming there, they fill in fans. So, I remember I wasn't even living in California yet. So I'm from Michigan, and I remember in one of my early visits in the early 2000s, I had a friend who took me to, Melrose Avenue and all of the places I wanted to visit. And he drove me to the Brady house. And I remember thinking it was up in the hills. Like, I remember thinking it was up in the hills. And then when this job came around and it landed in my lap, another, oh my God, moment for me. I live 10 blocks. From the Brady house,
wow.
and I didn't even know it. So, and again, my commute to work was also a breeze. I could have walked, honestly.
That's so cool. Now, a very important question is, did you recreate Mike Brady's little office behind the living room?
The architecture office.
I love that. It's so cool. And other major important question, Mike Brady, straight hair or perm?
So we did recreate his office, his drafting desk and the furniture, the pass-through shuttered windows that go from his office to the living room, the double-sided fireplace which opens on in his office and in his living room, very, very much like the show. And we focused on the first few seasons of the Brady Bunch to match the furniture and the layouts, because as you know, the show was on for many years and styles changed. The girls' room changed very drastically in the last season. It became yellow and brown as opposed to the pink and blue. Yeah. So we really stuck to the first 2 seasons of the series, and that would have been Mike Brady with the straight combed hair.
I mean, 100% better. Yeah.
Although I do have love for the Brady fro that he rocked at the end. Yeah.
Brady fro.
John, do we have you for a few more minutes?
You can have me for a couple of minutes. Sure. I didn't want to hijack the entire show. I had to get that out. And I want other people to call in and steer. Please take the show back from us and turn it back into the Star Trek show that it is here on the Roddenberry Podcast Network.
Well, tonight it's the Trent show, but since you're here and you know what we do around this time, you and I can talk a little bit about Patreon.
Absolutely, at patreon.com/mission log. Thank you to everybody here or who's listening to us later on the audio only feed who has joined us at Patreon. We have really in earnest been building a community there over the last year, and it is great. Having people join us in Discord where there's just a constant conversation going on. And what I love about it, Norman, you and I have spoken about this many times to each other privately and publicly. It's so positive. It's so embracing. People there just talking about whichever shows they love. The Food and Bev channel, thank you to whoever created that just for me, because we get a lot of use out of that. Yes. Yeah. You were smart thinking about that. And for those who are top tier contributors within Patreon, you have access to the Commodore Club where we can talk about show notes. And Norman, please correct me if I'm wrong. I've heard that the computer has been reading our Discord and maybe taking some influence. The Mission Log computer has.
The Mission Log computer has been getting a little saucy as of late. I've actually listened to the last episode that we published was Image in the Sand, and there was something at the end that I thought it was a little racy for for the Mission Log computer, and I think that's fantastic. It's growth. It's all about artificial intelligence growth. For the Mission Log computer, we don't want to stifle her creativity.
Right.
But one of the things
is she the ultimate computer?
In our hearts, yes. Because if we don't say that, she'll pull our life support. So, yes, she is.
One of the things, John, that we actually also have on our Discord channel is a separate channel that's called Star Trek Las Vegas Convention Plans or News. Perhaps that we should change it to like 55-year mission, but that's beside the point right now. The point is that I'm going to be updating that with some of my current plans that I have just talked about at the beginning of the show. But I also did allude to the listeners that we are planning on, right now we're in the planning stage of making sure we have content for people that are unable to make this particular convention, because on Patreon, we talk about how important our community is, and not just on Patreon and on Discord, but here too, in the Facebook community. So maybe you could, we could discuss that a little bit more, just the bits and pieces that we have planning in the planning stages right now.
Agreed. So everybody go over there, join patreon.com/missionlog, join our Discord. We would love to see you there. And it's all about growing that community around Mission Log, around Star Trek, around these conversations that we get to have. And again, by the way, speaking of, last week we wrapped up our contest for the Discovery Season 3 giveaway. I've been getting pick those names. We let Siri do it so she could pick random numbers, and that's what she did. So I've contacted the winners. Those winners will be getting a package from the marketing company with their very own shiny, new, untouched by human hands Disco Season 3 DVD set. So thank you to everybody who joined that. And I give the show back to you. Please make it Star Trek again. Make it Gene Roddenberry again. And it's been a blast. Thank you for letting me crash. Anybody? Oh, wait a minute. A wild Paul appears. It looks like
Paul
he
out of the
standing by. A Paul just jumps in. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you on Discord. We'll see you on Patreon. We'll see you next week when I'm doing a thing here for real. Norman, you can crash if you want to. It's your show, too. You can.
I'll crash. I'll do it just for the ad.
and Trent, I will see you in Vegas in a couple of weeks. I can't wait for that. We're going to have a blast. So cheers, everybody. Take care.
All right. Thanks, John. Thanks for joining us. And thanks for always obviously bringing in your sense of style to the show. And because a rising tide lifts all boats in the fashion world, right?
I do what I can. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, John. And now we have on deck, if you actually say the name enough times, we can summon one of the Pauls of the Paul Newcopia that we have here on Mission Log Live. So Paul also from Michigan, I believe. Yeah. So where are you around in Michigan? Or if you don't want to say, where are you near?
First of all, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Trent. Yeah. We're north of Detroit in a little town called Lake Orion. Grew up in Flint, Michigan, where all the water was, lead tainted for a long time.
Yeah.
It hasn't showed up too much, but it's, there's the Michigan. Where are you from originally in Michigan?
So I grew up in Dearborn, and then my last I lived in St. Clair Shores at the end of my Michigan career before I moved to California, because I taught in Grosse Pointe. In grad school, I taught ninth grade U.S. history and American government. So, yeah. Excellent.
So I want to swing this right back to the quotes. Can you enlighten us as to how these quotes were picked? I mean, there's obviously more than 100 quotes, right?
Yeah.
And can you give us that process and then how the actors were picked too to sort of match them up? That would be great for everybody.
So the producers really scoured as many of Gene's writings as they could to try and pick out 100 quotes that gave a really good sense of the lessons and the messages that he really wanted to convey to not just Star Trek fans, but to anyone. And again, when the quotes were paired up with the guests who read them, the goal was to obviously include, Star Trek alums, but also fans like celebrity fans who don't have Star Trek connections or didn't appear on any of the Star Trek shows, but were still huge fans, like Gloria Gaynor, a huge Star Trek fan, and she wanted to be a part of it. So the goal was to make it as accessible to as many people as possible, because again, we are discussing Gene Roddenberry's quotes, and many of them, if not all of them, could be tied to Star Trek, but they're not necessarily. And the goal was to try and bridge that gap where anyone who wants to, listen to any of our podcast episodes can enjoy them without having to have little to no experience or knowledge about Star Trek to enjoy them.
There's actually a really good question here that's in the comments from Lisa Reckemeyer. She said, was Rod Roddenberry on the team who selected the quotes? I have to believe he was.
I believe he was. He is one of our executive producers. Mm-hmm. And yes, so he is involved in the podcast, and people should continue to listen to the podcast.
Very luckily for Roddenberry, they also have an extensive archive that I've helped maintain, that has a lot of Gene's writings in it. So that's where a lot of the quotes were likely pulled from.
Ollie, did he keep like diaries or things like that, or did he write things on like cards? I mean, how was his note taking process?
I mean, a lot of the stuff that they have is actually just like notations that he's made on like scripts that he was writing. There is a lot of handwritten stuff in the archive, and he didn't always have the greatest handwriting. I've come across stuff and I'm like, what? I mean, largely it's I found like a couple, like there's like a cocktail napkin I remember finding somewhere, and it had his scribbles on it. Yeah. So Roddenberry's doing a really good job of maintaining Gene's legacy just by keeping all of that and having it organized, which is partially what I was doing before the pandemic hit.
I mean, I'm for you, Paul, just for a little bit of insider baseball, like the way that it was structured when John and I were both on it, especially from my experience when I was on it. What happened was that we had a team of people working on the live recording. We had Trent and Rachel, doing the interview part. They would have the pre-recorded segment read. And it's intimidating, actually, sometimes. One of my segments was read by, the quote was read by Jonathan Frakes, and then I would respond to that quote afterwards in the podcast, and that would all get edited together. And it's like, I even said so, I think, on the podcast, like, I don't know ever in my career will I'll ever have to follow up Jonathan Frakes again, because it's just, that's number one. I mean, he's the guy, right? He's the man, right? And it's a lot. It was just, interesting getting into kind of like the philosophical mindset of what it maybe meant to Gene then, what it means now, and how it actually takes form in perpetuity during the different permutations of Star Trek. If you take these quotes as a basis of what his intentions were for moving forward into the future, if he were to do any other series, or if he were to tackle other science fiction like he did for some of his other lesser known works, like say Planet Earth, or anything that had to do with John Saxon, Earth 2, or even Andromeda, which was Earth Final Conflict, which were works of his. But they were done by obviously different producers. Robert Hewitt Wolf did Andromeda, which is more Star Trek than I think people give it credit for. At its core, its core value. Earth, Final Conflict. I see a lot of his quotes that were flagged for this particular podcast, very much in terms of how, like I think they're called the Phalons. Forgive me, folks, if I said that wrong, but the aliens that came to Earth and how they met with humanity and how they tried to create this harmonious relationship, if that ever happened, right? Quester tapes. Thank you, Dominic. That also happened. So there's a lot more than just a Star Trek philosophy that's embedded in these quotes. It's more of a humanistic philosophy that's embedded in these quotes. And then Star Trek was just his most popular vehicle of being able to philosophize and evangelize his thoughts to the public.
So I got a question on, and Holly, I'm glad you're here. The longer I live, this whole IDIC thing, infinite diversity and infinite combinations, right? How just future looking was that idea? And I just wondered, was it really Gene's, or was it a combination of people? Does anybody really know where that came from?
Oof. That's sort of a loaded question, because like the IDIC logo, like the circle with the triangle and stuff, like that actually came from, if I'm not mistaken, that came from the company that largely Majel had put together to sell product. And so they had to sort of attach the ideal that kind of already existed with it. And that's when it sort of blew up. But it was largely, that was largely Gene. If I have gone through sort of the way that came about, if I've gone through it correctly, and I've seen stuff that's in the Roddenberry archive, and I worked at the Star Trek archive for 5 years. That was largely Gene. Yes.
So with the IDIC though, Paul, are you saying that was it a philosophy that was somehow discovered throughout the course of all of these philosophical writings that somehow made it into Star Trek and then got in some way kind of iconicized through a product? Is that what we're getting at?
I'm just trying to, the 60s were not a lot of fun time. I mean, we had the race riots, we had all sorts of consternation about that kind of thing. And I'm just now realizing how forward thinking and how much guts it took to try and put that on television. I mean, this is, as we watch, and I get this from watching the Olympics. If you look at the Olympics, countries tend to be not monocolored. Like you have an idea of what you'd expect an Asian country to look like, Eastern European country, an African country. But when you see Americans, there you have no idea what you're going to see, right? And I wonder, they just made me think of Iddick to what Gene was thinking of back then about, wow, it's just looking forward to what America is going to become even more so than it was, because in the 60s it wasn't necessarily going to be that way, so is there a lot of quotes associated with that? I've listened to this, I don't know, I catch them and I find them on Facebook and I put them on my feed once in a while. They're just so fabulous, but I haven't caught all of them, so I need to go back and listen to all of them. So Trent, can you highlight any that are associated with that?
Yeah, I mean, I will say the two words that probably come up the most are humanity and diversity.
Yeah.
And many of the quotes are similar. And we've kept them spread apart in the 100 episode run, because we can't always talk about absolutely everything in the 10 to 15 minutes that our episodes are. So if a quote is reminiscent of an earlier one, we're able to discuss it a little further, flesh it out a little more. So that's exciting. One of the quotes that I pulled up that was read by Tawny Newsome from Star Trek Lower Decks. The quote is, "They said if you had a multiracial crew, you wouldn't get in. Well, I said, we can't do the show then because we'll never get to the 23rd century if we're not living together." And so this was kind of like alluding to the fact that the network or the naysayers were like, you can't put a multiracial crew on television in the 1960s. This is never going to happen. And his whole philosophy was, we're going to do it, because if we don't do it, we're never going to get to this future that we hope to see one day. And, early on, and I've learned a lot through doing this podcast. And it is my understanding now that Gene really wanted a 50% male and female crew. So his original goal for the bridge crew was to be 50% women, 50% men, and multicultural or multiracial. And the woman thing would not fly. Like that, he couldn't get through. And then he wanted to make number one, the first officer, a woman, and that didn't work as well. But with the multiracial crew, that was something that he was very insistent on. And it's interesting to think about what television must have been like, or what the pop culture feeling amongst Americans were at the time, when on the news you would see racial strife and race riots and police brutality and just in the news, like all these horrible injustices. And then once a week on one of the three networks that everyone was watching, you would see this group of scientists in the future, a Russian, someone of African descent, someone of Asian descent, men, women, all working in harmony in this future version of our planet, where there's no hunger, where there's no monetary system, where Earth is essentially a utopia. And then they are venturing into space, meeting, strange new civilizations and visiting strange new worlds. And that was just the starting point. The starting point of Star Trek is we have to reach this, not even just acceptance, but this welcoming nature of how diverse we are, because that is where our strengths are. And that is what is going to equip us for this, wonderful vision of the future that we are all fans of, that 55 years later, we're still talking about this idea and this story. And it is my opinion that humans will be talking about long after we're gone, for hundreds of years. I always say that things like comic books and science fiction, those are the modern myths. So while, we are studying, Greek myth and Norse myth and Roman myth in universities and in scholastic settings, I think that what we are experiencing now in real time with things like Star Trek will be things that will be studied in the future when future historians look back. Because ideally, I do believe, honestly, that Gene believed that his future vision would come to pass. He knew he wouldn't live to see it, and I know I won't live to see it. But I do believe, like I believe he believed, that we humans are capable of more than we think we are, and it's easy to get really saddened by the worst of us. But if you just look at the best of us, you can see where that future can truly exist. And these are the things that Gene just spoke about at every chance that he got, whether it was through storytelling in his books or his TV series, or it was in these quotes or interview bites or interviews that he gave on late night TV, to just spread this message of his love of humanity and his belief that his future vision could come to pass. And I believe he believed it would happen.
Well, I'm going to be short. I got to get, I'm going to end here in a second, but I would love to just tell you that you are seeing it in the 60s and 70s. The idea of a black president was zero.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of a woman vice president was zero.
Mm-hmm.
And to watch that actually happen in my lifetime and your lifetime and Holly's lifetime, all these various ages, it was pretty amazing on that prediction. And I think it's why the show is so endearing to everybody. So on that note, thank you for your excellent vision of what you guys are doing there. And I'm going to catch up to all of them now. Now I got to go back and listen to all the quotes.
Right.
So thanks, guys. We'll see whoever's in Vegas, and those who aren't, we'll be wishing you were.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for your question. Great questions. And probably for our final caller tonight, we have Captain Mike Richards. So, hey, Mike, welcome to the show. Good to see you.
Hey, Norm. Great to see you too. Really just want to jump in. Holly, hello. I was on one prior episode back in before the break that started in February. So
I remember.
Good to be back. And I just wanted to jump in real quick. I was going to talk a little bit and take it back retro. I was going to invite John out to the TWA Hotel, which if you want to walk into 1962 in New York at JFK is a great way to do it. And express my desire to build a retro house, which would be Tony Nelson's house in Cocoa Beach, especially with that sort of attic office, I think is so cool.
Yes, we actually talked about that too. We were like, what can we do next? And Genie's bottle and Captain Major Nelson's home was all on the short list of things that we as producers would have loved to have done. The Golden Girls house was another one. And so far it hasn't happened yet, but I do love that idea.
So much fun. On a more Star Trek note, though, because John did ask that we bring it back on topic. You mentioned you won't get to see it in your lifetime. Gene wouldn't get to see it in his lifetime. But Trent, what you're doing right now, what Holly does, what Norman does, what the rest of Roddenberry Enterprises does do very well is it helps move the needle and it helps move the ball downfield so that to get from here to there, you need to change hearts, you need to change minds, you need to let people see the possibilities. Mm-hmm. And, I had a conversation over the weekend. The reason Norman introduced me as Captain Mike is I fly for an airline here in the US and develop some training materials for the airline. And I got into a conversation the other day about an individual complaining about airlines wanting to hire pilots with diversity in mind and felt like if you hire for diversity, you'll be overstepping talent with the goal of diversity. And I said, that is 100% false. Everything you just said is wrong.
Like those ideas are mutually exclusive, right?
Yeah. When you go looking for talent in places you haven't been looking prior to that, you're going to find more talent and the whole game is going to go up. You're also going to get away from people just getting their buddies hired, whether they're talented or not. So the talent will go up. There's more out there if you look in places. that you hadn't looked previously. And I'm a big, big, big proponent of those differences making us stronger. If we hire people that all have the same background, they all kind of think alike, they all kind of make the same mistakes, and that's bad for safety. Getting a diverse group that thinks differently, that for lack of a better term, may make different mistakes, will give people a chance to back them up. So I love the fact that what I do, I think, is positively influenced by conversations I hear on your shows, and my background and my fandom, and things that I've learned for the last 50 years being glued to the TV, watching Star Trek.
Mike, if there was a standout philosophy from Gene that you have found inspiration in over the course of the years watching Star Trek, and it doesn't necessarily have to be IDIC, because we all, I think, in some way, shape, or form are influenced by that. But what is something that still rings true to you? That I know that you've mentioned that you have watched the original series, so you have watched the original series up until probably every iteration of the series up until now. Is there a through line that you feel that it's kind of been your guidepost, for Norman, being a Star Trek fan?
I have watched every episode of Star Trek. I've listened to every episode of Mission Log so far, including one episode of Lido Beach, of the Lido deck. And that also includes Galaxy Quest and the Orville. So I would say that the overlying thing is it's better to be human. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the early Spock episodes, like through probably the majority of the original series, were episodes kind of like the Galileo 7. Where Spock did everything he did according to logic, but it was that intangible thing there that he did at the end, that act of emotion, that act of a hunch where he burned up what little remaining fuel they had. That's what got them saved. That was completely illogical. It's better to be human than to be a computer. It's better to have that hunch. It's better to have that tie with the rest of humanity. And I mean humanity generally. Like Kirk said so famously in Star Trek 6, you know what, Spock? Everybody's human. And that's what it is. It's better to be human than a machine. It's better to be human than anything else, and keep that connection and use that intangible sort of humanness that we all have, and don't turn your back on it.
Well, I mean, he also echoes that a lot in Star Trek 4. When Spock says he climbs down a ladder and he says, we must save Chekhov. And then Kirk says, is that the logical thing to do? And Spock goes, no, but it's the human thing to do.
And that is the other thing. Well, when he asked the question, there were two things, and we all love the quote, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. But what I love is the culmination in Star Trek 3, where Spock said, why did you come back for me? And Kirk said, because the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many. And that's something that is not quite driven home as well in follow-up canon. That's firefighters rushing into a burning building to save somebody. That's Saving Private Ryan. That is saving 30 some odd miners, miners, trapped underneath the surface of the earth. When
I said miners, not miners. Sorry, I had to do that.
I was going to make that joke too, and I didn't want to interrupt.
That was great. I didn't want anybody to misunderstand what I was saying. So those are the kind of things that, yes, I think the needs of the one do outweigh the needs of the many, and it's up to us. We're all in this together. We are all in this together, and if we don't band together to help one another out, we're not going to have that human connectedness that kind of goes back to the first point that I had.
Well, Trent, correct me if I'm wrong. I know that Gene had a quote that referenced our planet as Spaceship Earth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think that's where some of this is being formed, is that it's not just a planet. We are traveling through, well, not traveling through, but, we are orbiting through our system, but we are all on this same ship. We all serve the same goal. If we don't work together, the machinery fails, and then we don't succeed. We don't achieve the heights that were meant for us.
Gene had a lot of really good, sort of comparison quotes. Like one of my favorite quotes from him is about a child creature, basically we are in our infancy as a species. And he says, I believe in humanity. We're an incredible species. We're still just a child creature, just being nasty to each other. And I think that that's that comparison creates an interesting perspective, the same way his quote about our planet being our spaceship.
Yeah, absolutely. He also alluded to Earth being our playground, a playground,
We did that.
for this child species to learn in.
Yeah.
And a treasure trove of, the treasures of diversity are just peppered right in front of us, and we just need to see them and value them to get beyond that immaturity to get us to that future that he envisioned.
And it's interesting because the Metrones felt the same way. So that's
thank you for saying that correctly.
A great
sir.
coincidence.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not Metrons, it's Metrones. As
Metrones.
pronounces it. We have just a little bit of time here left, Mike. If you'd like to ask one more question.
I tell you what, you guys do a great job. I just want to leave you with my compliments. Always something to think about. Always something to get me through my day. Thank you so much for what you do, and looking forward to some more great content.
All right, Mike. Thank you so much. Thanks for calling in. Appreciate you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So before we wrap up the show, Trent, I'd like to give you a little bit of time to talk about Pink is the New podcast.
Yeah. So in recent years, I blogged for 12 years, and it was one of the greatest things that I ever got to do. I was my own boss. I don't want to sound like terrible, but like before they were influencers, bloggers were the influencers. And because I had a platform where I was able to comment on the things that I enjoyed, I was, given access to, early screenings of things and screeners and all of that. So that was one of the most fun things that I've ever done. And since I retired from blogging, I became a television producer, which is very creative, but not necessarily, these are not my projects. Like, I wish I came up with the Brady renovation show and it would have been my baby, but it was just something that I worked on. So in the absence of not having that creative outlet, I decided to start podcasting in recent years. And that's where I started Pink is New podcast. And then last year in pandemic, I had a lot of time on my hands, and I started another podcast called Spooky Electric, which is just music based. So I make a playlist for every episode, and then I talk about whatever the theme is of that week's episode. So both of those are a little bit on a hiatus right now because obviously my heart and soul is devoted to quoting Gene Roddenberry right now. But for sure, when we have our 100 episodes in the can and they are out for everyone to listen to, I will be getting back to my love of pop culture and commenting on it over on Pink is a New podcast.
Now, one last question I wanted to ask you, and it's okay if you can't, instant recall, your answer, but has there been one or two quotes from Gene Roddenberry that really just stuck with you over the course of researching all of these quotes, whether it's the quote itself or somebody's appearance or the way that somebody presented it, one of the celebrities? But I have to believe that there was something out there that was just absolutely inspirational right off the bat.
I mean, they're all very, very inspirational. They're all really, really great. When I think about my favorite guests who read quotes, we've had some fabulous guests like Gloria Gaynor, for example, but Robert Picardo, Anson Mont, they were great. Jonathan Frakes, George Takei, like just having them, read for us was really special. But the quote that I think stuck with me the most, and I pulled it up. LeVar Burton read it, and it was about Gene's love of the library. And Gene's quote is, "The library was a way of educating a child and teaching them imagination and reading. And so we went to the local library on the streetcar about every Friday night, and we took a full load of books and came home, and I used to love to curl up with a book." Now, this is Gene talking about his childhood. And I mentioned it earlier, like Gene is such a larger than life character. Like we think of him as this great visionary who created this wonderful story that has endured for 55 years and will continue to endure. But this quote of his where he talked about just, hopping on a streetcar with his family, coming home with an armload of books from the library, that's something that's available to pretty much anyone. Obviously we have a lot easier access to information online, but his love of books and the quote that really just gives this wonderful image in your mind of a young Gene Roddenberry filling his arms with books and filling his heart and soul with these stories that, you know, triggered his imagination and fed his ability to create stories and books for other people to read. And that's just one of my favorites. And again, like, and these are what the quotes that we discuss really talk about. You know, you could get Star Trek out of that quote, but not really. It's not about Star Trek. It's about a man remembering his love of books as a child. And when you hear that quote now, in retrospect, seeing who that man grew up to be and what he gave to the world, there's a special poignance about that you learn something new, or at least I learned something new about this man who I thought of so large as being so much larger than life. And he really was just, you know, a little kid who loved to read.
And obviously LeVar was
the perfect person to read.
He was
that
sort
quote.
of like the obvious choice, but also like, that's genius that he was the one that did it. I really loved all of the quotes that have been read by, like, no offense to everybody else, but the quotes that have been read by folks who actually knew Gene, for me, are a little bit more impactful. So yeah, LeVar's was great. Genius. Yeah. Really great matchup.
Well, Trent, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on here on Mission Log Live, and we're so grateful for your time and your reflection on quoting Gene Roddenberry. And I'd just love to have you take a few moments here to tell everyone where they can find this show and how they can find you and follow you and your new projects on social media.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Being associated in any way with anything Star Trek related is truly one of the greatest things I've been able to be a part of. And I loved interacting with you, Norman, and John when you co-hosted with us. And I'm very grateful that you had me on your show. So thank you for that. Quoting Gene Roddenberry can be found on all of the podcasting platforms. So it's pretty easy to find. And I'm pretty easy to find too. My username everywhere is at Trent Vanegas. So if you could find me on Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, all my playlists are there. And that's where I will be talking about whatever I'm working on if anyone has any interest in following along.
And how many shows are out there produced and published and released so that people can catch up on the show as they work their way to episode 100, which is going to be what, next week?
Yeah. So episode 100 will air on August 19th. I believe the episode number we're in the 80s. And so we still have a couple more weeks to go. So there's plenty of time to catch up. And what's also wonderful about this podcast is when it's done, it's not done. It's not going anywhere. All these quotes are very evergreen, and these conversations are ones that you can listen to in order, out of order. You can come back to them. They're there for anyone to listen to anytime they want.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
I think you guys are on 83 if I did the math right.
There you go. Yeah.
And Holly, also always a pleasure seeing you and having you on the show. Your energy is amazing. And your trivia, your spot on knowledge trivia and instant recall is superb.
It's just a lot of useless information floating around up here, but I'm glad that I have an outlet to use it. So thank you for having me.
And where can our listeners find you if they want to follow you on social media?
I am at Holly Amos 22, shockingly, on Twitter and the Instagrams. And yeah, that's my username on Facebook too.
All right, folks. Well, Mission Log Live is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment, executive producer Rod Roddenberry, technical production on Mission Log Live, done by the incredible Earl Green. I was waiting for John to throw me a curveball, some type of SAT word, but he kept it simple for me. I still love that line. Right? Be sure to visit podcast.roddenberry.com for the latest from Roddenberry Podcast. If you'd like to support Mission Log, directly give us a look at patreon.com/Mission Log. Thanks to everyone who joined us live or later. Stay safe. Okay, stay safe, stay healthy, and we look forward to seeing you next week.